When you first get told about pacing, usually what happens is your doctor or pain specialist hands you a leaflet, or maybe they give you a web link, and you get told basically you have to break up your activities, okay? You have to pace your activities. And that's it, really. Nobody explains it to you, nobody helps you with it, nobody lets you know what it involves. It's not exactly straightforward, and it can be challenging and hard to learn, but once you get the hang of it, it can be a really useful coping tool. So in this little video, I'm going to go through some tips and some hacks about pacing that I've learned along the way, and hopefully they can help you to get a handle on it and make it work for you. Pacing's all about breaking activities or tasks or just about anything down into more manageable chunks, and then interspersing those chunks with rest. So I can take an example for you of a domestic chore, let's say laundry. Laundry is one of the hardest from a pain management and fatigue management point of view. So you might say, for example, put the load of laundry in the machine on Tuesday night, then run the machine Monday morning, then you take the rest of... Did I just mix up the days of the week? Yeah, I did. Okay, that's not really helpful. All right, let's say you put the laundry in the machine on a Monday night. Tuesday morning, you run the machine, and then you take the rest of the day on Tuesday to hang up the laundry. You might be able to do, for example, a third of the load in the morning time, and then another third around the middle of the day, and another third in the evening. You might choose to do slightly more or slightly less of it if you know that you're better at different times of the day as well. Another example with a domestic chore might be, cleaning the bathroom. So you might be able to do part of the bathroom, like say just the shower, on a Thursday, and then hopefully you could maybe finish, the rest of the bathroom or clean the floor on the Friday. Obviously, a big caveat with all of this is it's just going to depend on how your fatigue levels are and pain levels are on any given day. For this as well, the spoon theory of energy can be handy. You may have heard of it before. It's where usually in the morning, or basically when you're facing any type of activity or chore or errand, you try to figure out as best you can how many spoons of energy you have for the day. Then you kind of decide, okay, do I have enough spoons? Why do medical professionals recommend that we do this? Well, it's about keeping the pain and fatigue levels at sort of semi-baseline, hopefully, levels. So your baseline of pain or fatigue might be around, ideally, a 4 or 5 out of 10. And by pacing your activities, you just make sure, you keep the rev counter in a manageable kind of range. You don't want the pain levels to be going up to like 6, 7, 8 out of 10, particularly, domestic chores, things like that, is that they are repetitive and constant, right? So we got to do chores and we got to do errands all the time. And without pacing, that means you're driving your pain levels, or it makes life very difficult to bear, and it makes the pain and fatigue very difficult to cope with. I've also done a video on the fight or flight system and how the medical profession thinks that, by trying to go through the pain and to keep pushing and pushing, effectively what they think we're doing is that we produce adrenaline when we're trying to push through. That then slightly masks or covers up the feeling of the pain that we're going through, we think we're kind of doing okay. But when that adrenaline drops off, the pain comes back and all of the sensation comes back, and a lot of the time the pain is then worse because we've been pushing through. And the same would go for a type of fatigue type scenario. So, you know, you grit your teeth and you push through, you then experience like a big increase in your fatigue levels and you're unable to function for goodness knows how long. So from me to you, I kind of would encourage you, if you can, give pacing a go. I'm not saying it's going to make things 10 times better, but it can be a really useful coping tool. There are difficulties with it though. I'm going to try to minimize them. It is really hard and it takes a lot of practice. First of all, one of the things that is really kind of difficult to cope with is just how it impacts on time, because obviously it makes planning and accomplishing tasks really quite slow. You have to learn is patience. So you have to accept that lots of the things that you need to get done are just going to take much longer. I think also it can be a little bit more difficult to learn if your personality is not one that is compatible with it. So you might, for example, be the kind of person who is a bit forgetful, and you know, you've tried to train yourself over the years to remember things, and maybe one of the ways that you've learned to deal with your forgetfulness is to make sure that you finish things. Well, you know, partially completing a task and then having to go off and rest for hours before you tackle it again is actually makes you more forgetful, because it's harder to remember that, oh, there's still 1/3 of a load of laundry that I've got to hang up, you know, from hours ago. Anything really. I mean, you might have letters to write, you might have tax returns to complete, you might have emails you want to draft, who knows? Or you might be the kind of person who is way more comfortable with like doing all your errands on a particular day of the week or a particular evening. Like maybe you know that Thursday evening is a good night for you to just tackle a whole bunch of household stuff or grocery shopping or whatever. Obviously, if that's the way that you've been used to doing things, then you kind of want to stick with it. You know, like maybe you make yourself a list and you get it all done on a Saturday afternoon. Unfortunately, like pacing's completely incompatible with that. And we could also say, couldn't we, that probably means pain and fatigue management in general are completely incompatible with that style of doing things. For me personally, I find it incredibly frustrating. So if you've tried pacing and you're frustrated with it, I know exactly how you feel. The English have a saying, which is to crack on, which basically is a bit like the Nike slogan, you know, just do it. And unfortunately, pacing means it's impossible to do either of those things. I can't remember the last time I was able to just crack on with something. I don't like that feeling at all. There are a lot of tricky feelings around pacing. It sounds simple, but it's actually not. You know, when you're in school and in your 20s and you kind of have ways of getting yourself into shape as a grown-up, where you teach yourself how to be organized and how to complete tasks, you know, and how to make sure that you stay on top of things. And basically what pacing means is you kind of have to unlearn all of that. Like going back to our earlier example of the bathroom, you might decide on a Thursday to tackle the shower, right? But you fully intend to clean the rest of the bathroom on the Friday. Sensible, okay? That's pacing. But unfortunately, you have a big flare-up on the Friday. So that means that your plan is parked. The whole of pacing involves coping with the uncertainty that we face on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. At the beginning, at least, you feel like everything is a bit chaotic because really you're surrounded by half-finished errands and half-finished tasks. It may be that you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, that doesn't sound so bad. I think I could manage that. And my hat goes off to you, because I think that does illustrate, you got to give yourself a little pat on the back there, because you're probably quite a mentally flexible person. Where we can run into difficulty, I think, is if, and I know that myself that I'm like this, is where you have maybe some mental inflexibility, where you don't really want to, or you don't really have the capacity to accept that things are different. This is where acceptance and commitment therapy can come in as a coping tool. And what that would teach you in this situation is that, yes, the feelings are really difficult. Yes, they're really hard. It's a skill to be able to sit with those feelings and accept them. There's a lot of mindfulness, I think, in that. So in order to be able to do that, first you have to learn and practice mindfulness, which is a skill in itself, isn't it? You got to be able to develop a certain awareness, get to be able to just notice when you're having a thought about something. It takes a lot of practice in my experience. Once you've done that and you're able to notice the thoughts, then you can think about the effect that that's having on you, and you can sit with it for a little bit. ACT isn't about pretending that the pain isn't there or pretending that the pain is going to get better. It's not about pain reduction either. It's simply a coping mechanism. And I think they are pretty, they do admit that they've nicked it from Buddhism, basically. So they've nicked mindfulness and acceptance ideas from the Buddhist religion. They admit that, I think. I'm not outing them or being troublesome there. They totally acknowledge that that's what they've done. On a practical level, it can be quite disconcerting, because what it means for me, for example, personally, one voice in my head yelling about how it just wants to crack on, and I've got another voice in my head being all zen and going, oh well, you've been here before, you know how to handle this, it's not so bad. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. You know that this is the best way of getting this done, so just relax about it. Meanwhile, the other voice is still yelling. It's a bit like cognitive dissonance, when you've got two conflicting beliefs in your brain at the same time. So I've got two thoughts about pacing going, and they're going not this for 10 years. So it does get easier though. I think the voices just kind of calm down. And also, I know from experience now that there are days that are so bad that I'm just not going to be able to do anything at all. And it creates a kind of feeling of a little bit of gratitude for the days when you can't do things. If you give this a go, I think you'll be surprised by how inventive you can be. As you develop mental flexibility about this over time, and give yourself time, that's another thing. It's one of the things that we need to give ourselves credit for as people who are coping with chronic pain and chronic illness, which is thinking of inventive solutions for the situations that we face every day. So what if we were going to do pacing properly on this video? Well, we would probably have a point in the video where you would take a little pause and go off and make yourself a little, perhaps, hot drink, or you might need to have a rest, or you might feel that you could have a gentle stretch, perhaps. I even have to do pacing on these videos because although lots of expert YouTubers recommend making a bunch of videos in one day, and they also recommend making sure that you release videos on a regular basis because otherwise the YouTube algorithm won't show your video to people who search for it. That type of way of doing things is just not realistic for us. Might have picked up on this actually, is if you see in the videos that the lighting goes skew with, or like one shot looks quite different to another, that's because I've taken a break. So I can't film like one video in one go. A really, really brilliant tip that I would like to share with you was given to me by an occupational therapist. Now, a lot of the time, if you meet a chronic pain medical professional or a chronic fatigue medical professional, they'll tell you about pacing physical activities. But a really good idea if you've got fatigue is also to pace mental activities. Something really tough that you need to read, or let me think of other examples. Maybe you're house hunting, so you're having to do an internet search, you know, that involves looking at loads and loads of flats or apartments. Maybe you're trying to research like the ingredients that are in food because you've got dietary limitations. Possibly, you know, it could just be something like having a really long telephone conversation or a really long work meeting. The advice that the occupational therapist gave me is that you can also do mental pacing. So you can split up activities, try to chop and change your activities. And you'll soon figure out, once you've done it for a while, you'll get to the point where you feel the brain fog is too much, and you will figure out when you need to change. It may be that if you're going through a phase of immense fatigue, that there's nothing for it but to rest, and that's okay too. And you should totally, as the saying goes, listen to your body. I've had personal experience of like trying to push and push and push. It does exacerbate the symptoms, and it makes it more and more difficult to achieve even the most basic of tasks. What we're aiming for is, again, to keep the symptoms at a slightly more manageable level, at a level that is a little bit easier to cope with. You may have never tried pacing before, or you may have tried it and really actively disliked it, but I hope maybe that this video has been helpful for you, and it might give you some ideas about how to give it another go. That's it for this little video, you guys. I hope you liked it. If you do, don't forget to subscribe or like. And actually, what I described earlier about how the algorithm doesn't like people who post infrequently or not on a regular basis, you can help me get around that by clicking the like button. I hope I see you again on the next video, and take it easy if you can in the meantime. If that's possible for you, hope you can find some time, and whatever you do, go gently on yourself.